Chapter 5. The Legacy of Judgment. The camp of Israel carried an air of somber quiet in the days following the divine judgment. The ground where Korah, Dathan, and Abiram had stood defiant was now an unsettling scar, a silent reminder of God's swift justice. Whispers filled the camp as families mourned their losses, recounted the events, and wrestled with their fear of the Lord. Amid the stillness, Moses and Aaron reflected on what had transpired. They knew that the rebellion had been quelled, but the seeds of doubt and distrust among the people had not been fully uprooted. A tense rebuilding. The camp was alive with activity, though it was far from cheerful. The tribes went about their daily tasks, tending livestock, preparing food, and repairing tents. But there was a tension in the air. Conversations were quiet, eyes cast downward as if speaking too loudly might invite divine wrath once again. Near the tabernacle, Eleazar, Aaron's son, oversaw the final placement of the hammered bronze sheets made from the censers of the consumed leaders. The sheets now adorned the altar, their polished surfaces catching the sunlight. To Eleazar, they symbolized a stark warning to the people of Israel, a permanent reminder that God's holiness was not to be challenged. Children watched from a distance as Eleazar completed his work. "Why did God do that to them?" one boy whispered to his friend. The older children, who had witnessed the rebellion, shook their heads in silence. The story of Korah's rebellion was quickly becoming a tale passed down from parents to children, a cautionary lesson in obedience and humility. Moses reflects on leadership. Inside his tent, Moses sat alone, the weight of leadership heavy upon him. For decades, he had guided the Israelites through triumphs and trials, often bearing the brunt of their complaints and doubts. Yet this rebellion had cut deeper than most. Korah had been a fellow Levite, a man entrusted with sacred duties. To see him rise in defiance and drag others into rebellion pained Moses more than he could express. Aaron entered the tent, his expression solemn. "The people are quiet, but they are afraid," he said. "Some still whisper against us, blaming us for what happened." Moses sighed deeply. "Their hearts are still hard, Aaron. They have seen the Lord's power, yet they do not trust in him. How much longer will they resist his authority?" Aaron placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "We must continue to pray for them, Moses. The Lord has shown us mercy time and time again. Perhaps he will soften their hearts." Moses nodded, though the burden of doubt lingered in his mind. He had seen firsthand how quickly the people turned from gratitude to rebellion. Would they ever truly learn to trust in the Lord's plan? Aaron's role affirmed. The blossoming of Aaron's staff had been a powerful sign of God's chosen leadership, but its impact on the people remained uncertain. To solidify Aaron's role as high priest and restore order, Moses placed the staff before the Ark of the Covenant as a testimony to future generations. "Let this be a reminder to the people," Moses declared to the assembly. "The Lord has chosen Aaron and his descendants to serve as priests. Anyone who dares to approach the sanctuary without being called will face death." The people listened in silence, their faces pale with fear. For now they seemed to accept the Lord's decision, though many still struggled with the memory of their lost leaders. The burden of leadership. In the following days, Moses and Aaron resumed their duties, ensuring the camp continued its journey through the wilderness. Yet the rebellion and its consequences weighed heavily on them. Moses, in particular, found himself reflecting on the burdens of leadership. One evening, as the sun set over the camp, Moses walked alone near the outskirts, his thoughts turned inward. He prayed aloud, his voice soft but resolute. "Lord, you have placed this burden upon me, and I have carried it as best I can. But I am weary, and the people's hearts are still hardened. Show me how to lead them, Lord. Give me wisdom, that I may do your will. The wind rustled gently through the wilderness, and though no voice answered, Moses felt a quiet assurance settle over him. He knew that his task was far from over, but he also knew that the Lord's presence would sustain him. A divided camp, meanwhile, divisions remained among the tribes. Some had fully embraced the lesson of Korah's rebellion, turning back to the Lord with renewed faith. Others harbored resentment, their hearts hardened by grief and pride. One evening, a group of men gathered near a fire, their voices low but filled with bitterness. "They say Aaron's staff blossomed," one man muttered, his tones skeptical. "But how do we know it wasn't a trick? Moses and Aaron control the tabernacle. They could have done anything to make it look like a sign." Another man shook his head. "The earth swallowed Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. How can you deny that was the hand of God? And yet," a third man interjected, "we are still here in the wilderness. Where is this promised land they speak of? How much longer must we wander while they claim to lead us?" The men fell silent, their doubts unspoken, but lingering in the flickering light of the fire. The next generation learns. While the elders wrestled with their doubts, the younger generation listened closely to the stories being told. Parents sat with their children, recounting the events of the rebellion in vivid detail. "Remember what happened to Korah and his men," one father told his son as they sat by the family's fire. "They challenged the Lord's authority, and he judged them. Never forget that God is holy, and his ways are higher than ours." The boy nodded solemnly, his wide eyes reflecting the firelight. "I won't forget, Father." These moments of teaching planted seeds of faith in the hearts of the young, ensuring that the lessons of Korah's rebellion would not be lost. A new challenge. As the camp began to settle once more, the whispers of unrest faded into the background. Yet Moses knew that their journey was far from over. The wilderness held many more trials, and the hearts of the people remained fragile. Moses gazes out over the encampment, his thoughts turning to the journey ahead. Would the people finally learn to trust in the Lord, or would their rebellion rise again?